Hey folks, welcome to Roll of Law. Today I want to continue my Problems with Puzzles series with the final entry in that, and that is puzzles are where the fun stops. So the issue that comes up here is that puzzles really have the potential to just wreck your day as a player or as a DM. Because if a player can't solve a puzzle, or if the group can't solve the puzzle, it can be really frustrating and it can cause the session to break down entirely. This problem is magnified often because DMs will place a puzzle in a way that people have to engage with it. You know, there's a stone door in the mountainside with a puzzle lock, and there's no good way to bypass it, and the players have to get through it in order to start the adventure, maybe. Or maybe they have to get through it in order to find the big treasure that they've been questing after. If you think of The Lord of the Rings, when Gandalf gets to the mountainside and encounters the Speak, Friend, and Enter puzzle, that's really the crux of the problem. And if you watch that and sort of read through that again, they spend hours trying to solve this. How much fun is it as a player or even as a DM for people to be stalled for hours trying to solve this puzzle until eventually the DM just kind of throws a lake monster at them to break up the tension? This can be really frustrating, and if the puzzle is beyond the capabilities of the players, you end up with a situation where the DM has to either give away the solution or otherwise fudge it, or for the players to just give up. Like, hey, I guess we don't go on this adventure. We can't get into the dungeon. And that might be the goal of the puzzle designer. You know, the NPC who actually built the puzzle wants it to block people. When I set the password to my bank account, I don't want this to be some clever ruse that somebody solves. I want it to be something that just wrecks their whole day. It's not something where you're hoping that they're going to get through it, but it's really bad for gameplay. Now, there are some solutions to this and some ways to mitigate this problem and make your puzzles better. So the first thing I'm going to raise is make your puzzles optional. Again, sort of coming back to that whole Lord of the Rings, Speak, Friend, and Enter, that's a non-optional puzzle. You can't go around it. They have to get through it. And that's fine in a narrative story. It really doesn't work in a situation where solving the puzzle isn't a sure thing. Like, Tolkien knew Gandalf was going to get through that door, but you as a DM don't necessarily know that your players are ever going to solve a puzzle, no matter how simple it is. And puzzles are always harder than you think they are. The players are always going to struggle more with them than you think they will, with rare exceptions. So a good way of dealing with this is to ensure that any puzzles are optional, so they might provide a benefit or a reward, but you don't need to do it in order to progress to the larger goal. So instead of this being the door that blocks entry into the dungeon, it might block treasure, bonus loot. Video games do this all the time, where you've got a puzzle that guards some sort of special item, but if you don't solve it, you can still get through the game just fine. That's something there for completionists or for people who want that extra reward. Or, this could be a situation where the puzzle might restrict access to the convenient main entrance, and if you can't solve it, you've got to go around to maybe a more dangerous secondary entrance. There might be more traps there or more guards or that kind of thing. So that also provides an incentive where there's a failure state. If you don't solve the puzzle, there's consequences to it, but it doesn't ruin the adventure. It doesn't shut down the game and stop all the fun in that same way. It's just, we can't solve the puzzle. We have to go do the hard thing and get XP doing it. You can also use a puzzle where the failure state is some sort of penalty. So, for instance, you can have a door and it's guaranteed that the players are going to open the door. The puzzle is to disarm the nasty trap. And so that way, the failure state is still, party gets through the door. Either way, the party gets through the door. But if they don't solve the puzzle, all they get is that sort of consequence that happens to it. That might be summoning a monster, it might be releasing some poison gas, etc. So think about, the thing you should be thinking about every time you put in a puzzle is, what happens to my game if nobody can solve this? What happens to my game if I actually got the puzzle wrong and there isn't a solution? I've done that before, where because I accidentally transposed two things, I made a puzzle that couldn't be solved. You want to have that to be a situation that doesn't destroy the game. You don't want to have sort of stalemates. So another aspect is limiting puzzles. And puzzles can be really frustrating because they can go on potentially forever. There's no sort of, if you think about a game like Monopoly, Monopoly as a board game is a game that often outstays its welcome. You're playing it for way longer than you're having fun. Or Risk, where you might be playing it and 2 players have been eliminated and the last 2 players are just, it's going on and nobody really is enjoying themselves anymore. You just want it to be over. If you can't solve a puzzle, it's the same thing. If the players are going at it for hours, failing over and over and over again, that's really not ideal. So one way to attenuate this is to create some sort of time limit or an attempts limit that ensures that the puzzle attempts will resolve in either success or failure. If you think of the game Mastermind, that's that game where you sort of set up different colors and it'll tell you if you've got, how many are in the right place and the right color, or how many are the right color but the wrong place, and you have to use deduction. In that game, you are limited by the number of tries. You've only got X many attempts to do it, after which you've just failed. So that creates a time-limited puzzle. You can't spend forever at it. You can, as mentioned, use a time limit. This means that you might still fail to solve the problem and be frustrated, but the misery of bashing your head against it will be limited in terms of how long the players spend at it. Keep in mind, you can combine this with what I just mentioned. That failure state doesn't have to be you never get in there. It can be that it opens up, now you've got a monster to fight, now you've got a trap, all of those things. So you can combine these things, and really you should. The hardest one to implement is multi-step puzzles, or puzzles that provide feedback. And what I mean by this is that a lot of puzzles are basically a one-step operation. The puzzle has 2 states, solved in one category and unsolved in the other. And there's no intermediate steps where you've made progress. Gandalf with that speak, friend, and enter puzzle. Until you get the right solution, there's no feedback as to whether you're close. It doesn't go, you're almost there. Or, hey, good try. It's just, nope, 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 nope. Yes, there we go. Same thing with entering a password. When you enter your password for your bank account, it doesn't say, ooh, you're getting closer. It doesn't give you warmer, colder, anything like that. And that makes sense, again, in game, but it's not the best for design. So this can also be really frustrating for players who can throw potential solution after potential solution at it without any indication of whether they're even on the right track. And they might be way off. They might have completely misunderstood what your puzzle is about. And now you're in the weeds. Now you've got the choice of either fudging the puzzle or providing them a hint or something. You're in a difficult spot. But some puzzles do provide intermediate feedback. If you think of the Tower of Hanoi puzzle, where you've got to move like a tower of stacked objects without ever having a larger object on top of a smaller one, you can see and you can feel how that goes. And you can see what's working just by checking it out. The wolf, sheep, grain puzzle, which I've mentioned in a previous video, also has that kind of tactile element to it. You could really do this, and I mean, this is not a bad idea at all, to set it up with little tokens that people can actually play with on the table and fiddle around with and get a feel for what they're doing. So you can also make a puzzle involve several sub-puzzles, each of which has a similar solution. So you start off with simple versions and you move on to more difficult versions so that people can progress through and learn skills as they go, learn what the puzzles are about, And then that way they don't just feel like they're throwing their heads into a brick wall. They instead are making progress. Puzzle-based video games do this all the time without you noticing. So puzzle-based video games like Portal. Portal, play through it and turn on the director's commentary. And what you'll see is they'll say, hey, at this point, we're introducing this skill to the player in a very low stakes, calm sort of situation. And then once they have this skill, we're going to give them the more difficult version that relies on that skill. So they sort of feed you that information and train you up. Another aspect is to, and this is an optional thing, like you can do this or not depending, but you can make puzzles that people can return to, puzzles that you can walk away from and come back to. I have done this on a number of occasions and typically have found it works quite well. One thing I've done is, first level adventure. Their characters are just beginning and they encounter a puzzle that literally they cannot solve because it involves things that are beyond them. And you can make it clear that they can't solve it based on their current abilities. Maybe it involves moving large, heavy stones and they're just not strong enough. They don't have enough magic at this point. They just can't even move the puzzle. But then later they can come back to it. Like they started out at level 1, they can't do anything. When they're level 12, they can come back and say, hey, now we're mighty and we can solve this. And then they can find that treasure. That does a couple of things. First, it creates a bit more of a feeling of depth to your world in that it doesn't feel like everything is just crafted for them at the particular moment they're in. But it also reinforces that a puzzle is kind of low stakes in the sense that if you can come back to a puzzle when you have a solution later, then you don't need to jam up the game right now. Even if there's treasure behind that door, sometimes, it's an optional puzzle. They know they don't need to go through this door, but they have a feeling there's treasure behind it. You can still end up in that paralysis state where people are saying, we must solve this because if we walk away, we can never come back to it. If you make it clear to your players that they have the ability to go back to some of these puzzles, they're much more willing to say, you know what? We gave it the college try. We've been at this for 20 minutes. Let's go kill us a monster. And that's better for your game. That prevents that situation where just everybody's sitting around not having fun in a complete sort of locked stage. So that, I think, is a potential problem with the game. Puzzles are, as I've sort of mentioned throughout these videos, something that can be a lot of fun, but they can also really mess up your game. So I'm hoping that these are tips that you can implement in your games to make those games a little better, a little more fun. So let me know in the comments below if you have any thoughts. If there's any tips here that you think I've missed out on or omitted, let me know. And I'll also remind you guys, I've still got a puzzle going on. This is an example here. So the Win Gimlet Silver, again, because gold is too expensive, which is a puzzle where you can win real silver coins, is still ongoing. And I set that puzzle up quite intentionally that you couldn't solve it on day one. There just wasn't the information. But there's information coming out in videos as we go. And so you've got time. You can keep coming at it. You can leave it alone. You can whatever you want to do. And eventually the clues are going to get more and more clear, more and more in depth. And somebody's going to solve this thing and come away with a fair bit of silver as a prize. But it's probably not ruining your whole day, right? Nobody's sitting here stuck at their screens trying to get this silver. Because you can walk away, because it's an optional puzzle in your life, because, and hopefully there's multi-step elements to it where you can say, I've solved this part. I know what's going on here. And then work on solving the rest of it. So anyway, thank you guys for watching. As I mentioned, let me know in the comments what you think. Like this video, share it with friends, subscribe if you want to see more like this, and see you next time.